I
Don't
thought
lie to me.
ignoring
I
the
saw
HOA
you.
would be the end of it. But the night my house
you're
went
wrong.
up in
It wasn't
flames,
me.
I realized this wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. Someone wanted to destroy my life, and the truth behind it would shock everyone in court. I moved into the quiet neighborhood because it looked peaceful. Tall pine trees surrounded the road. The houses were spaced far apart, and everyone seemed to mind their own business. It was the kind of place where people waved politely, but rarely got involved in each other's lives. That was exactly what I wanted. After years of dealing with city noise and stressful work, I wanted silence, privacy, and a place that truly felt like my own. But that peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. One afternoon, a woman knocked on my door holding a thick folder and wearing a tight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She introduced herself as the head of the local HOA. Her tone was polite, but the way she looked around my property felt more like an inspection than a welcome visit. She explained that every homeowner in the area had to join the association. There were rules about fences, landscaping, parking, even the color of your mailbox. According to her, joining the HOA was mandatory. The problem was, my property wasn't actually part of the HOA. I had checked every document before buying the house. My land sat just outside their legal boundary. That meant they had absolutely no authority over me. When I calmly explained that to her, the smile on her face disappeared. She tried again, insisting that joining would be better for everyone. I refused, politely at first, then more firmly when she kept pushing paperwork toward me. That's when her attitude changed completely. Her voice got colder. She told me neighbors who refused to cooperate often found living here very difficult. I thought it was just an empty threat meant to scare me into signing. I laughed it off. But over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. First, it was small. Complaints sent to my mailbox. Anonymous letters accusing me of breaking rules that didn't even apply to me. Then HOA notices appeared on my door demanding fines for things, like my trash bin being visible or my driveway having oil stains. Again, they had no legal authority over my property. Still, the harassment kept escalating. Neighbors stopped talking to me. A few even avoided eye contact entirely. One older man quietly warned me one evening while walking his dog. He said arguing with the HOA president was a bad idea. People who cross her, he muttered, usually regret it. At the time, I thought everyone was exaggerating, until the night everything changed. It was around midnight when I woke up to a strange smell. At first I thought something electrical had burned in the kitchen, but when I stepped outside my bedroom, I saw orange light flickering through the windows. Smoke was filling the hallway, and within seconds I realized something terrifying. My house was on fire. Flames were already crawling up the wooden walls like they had been, burning for a while. The heat was intense, the smoke choking the air. I barely made it outside before the entire front porch was engulfed in flames. Neighbors gathered across the street as fire trucks arrived, their red and blue lights flashing across the trees. But while firefighters battled the flames, something else caught my attention. Standing among the crowd was the HOA president, watching my house burn, and for a split second I could swear she looked satisfied. At that moment I didn't know the truth yet. But what I didn't realize was that this fire would start a chain of events that would lead straight to a courtroom. And when that courtroom door finally opened, she would walk in, expecting to defend herself. Instead, she would come face to face with the last person she ever expected to see. Sitting in the judge's chair, the fire department called it suspicious. But the moment the investigators found a red gasoline can near the road, I realized this wasn't an accident. Someone didn't just want to scare me. They wanted to erase me from that neighborhood completely. As the flames finally died down and firefighters began checking the remains of my house, the cold reality started sinking in. Everything I owned was gone. The living room where I spent quiet evenings, the kitchen I had just renovated, the bedroom where I slept only hours before, all of it had turned into blackened rubble. Smoke still drifted into the night sky while police officers taped off the area. Neighbors whispered among themselves from across the street, watching the destruction like it was some kind of late-night spectacle. One officer walked toward me with a serious look on his face. He asked a simple question. "Do you have any enemies?" At first, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't the kind of person who made enemies. I worked quietly, kept to myself, and avoided neighborhood drama. But then a single name came to mind, the HOA president. Still, accusing someone of something like arson without proof sounded ridiculous. Even I wasn't ready to believe someone would go that far over a membership dispute. But the investigators weren't convinced it was an accident. One of the firefighters had found something unusual near the edge of the property. Something that immediately caught the attention of the police. A red gasoline container. It was partially hidden behind a bush near the road, like someone had tossed it there in a hurry. The smell of fuel was still strong in the air. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped, because earlier that night, before the fire started, I had noticed something strange. While I was closing my blinds around 11 p.m., I saw a car slowly driving past my house with its headlights off. At the time, I didn't think much of it, but now the memory suddenly felt important. Police officers began questioning everyone who had been near the area that night. Some neighbors claimed they saw someone walking down the road shortly before the fire started, but no one could give a clear description. Then something even stranger happened. While the investigators were examining the gasoline container, one of them noticed a small detail most people would have missed: a sticker on the side. It wasn't just any sticker. It was from a local hardware store only 5 minutes away from our neighborhood. That meant whoever bought the gasoline probably purchased it very recently. Police immediately started pulling store records and security footage. And that's when the investigation took a very unexpected direction. Because while detectives were searching for the person who bought the gasoline, someone from the neighborhood quietly approached me. It was the same older man who had warned me weeks earlier about the HOA president. He looked nervous, constantly glancing toward the crowd like he was afraid someone might overhear us. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. "I saw her earlier tonight," he whispered. I asked him who he meant. He leaned closer. "The HOA president. She was standing near your driveway about an hour before the fire started." For a moment I thought I misheard him. I asked why he hadn't told the police yet. His answer was simple: "Because people around here are scared of her." At that moment, a terrifying possibility started forming in my mind. What if the fire wasn't just a random act of vandalism? What if someone really did set my house on fire, just because I refused to join their HOA? But even if that suspicion turned out to be true, none of us knew yet that the investigation was about to uncover evidence so shocking that this simple neighborhood dispute would soon explode into one of the most unbelievable courtroom cases our town had ever seen. And when the person responsible finally walked into court, they never expected to see who was waiting. Behind the judge's bench, the police thought they were close to solving the case. But when the security footage from the hardware store finally appeared, everyone in the investigation room went completely silent. The next morning, detectives called me to the station. They had started reviewing security footage from the local hardware store, where the gasoline container was sold. At first, it seemed like a routine step in the investigation. But then something unexpected appeared on the screen. The footage clearly showed someone buying a red gasoline can and filling it at the fuel pump outside the store. The person wore sunglasses and a cap, trying to hide their face from the cameras. Still, one detail gave them away. The car. It was a dark SUV with a very distinctive license plate frame from our neighborhood HOA office. When detectives zoomed in and enhanced the footage, the license plate became readable. The vehicle was registered to one person, the HOA president. At that moment, the room fell silent. Investigators immediately started connecting the timeline. The gasoline purchase had happened just 2 hours before my house caught fire. Witnesses also reported seeing a similar SUV driving slowly near my property late that night. Suddenly, the situation wasn't just suspicious anymore. It was starting to look like a planned crime. Later that afternoon, police officers drove straight to her house. Several neighbors watched as investigators knocked on her door and began asking questions. At first, she acted calm, almost amused by the accusations. She insisted the gasoline was for yard work and claimed she had been home all night. But when detectives mentioned the witness who saw her near my driveway, her confidence started to fade. And when they asked about the security footage, showing her buying the gasoline container, her expression changed completely. For the first time since the investigation started, it looked like the woman who had terrorized the entire neighborhood was finally running out of excuses. But what no one knew yet was that this case was about to take an even stranger turn. Because weeks later, when the courtroom doors finally opened, she would walk inside expecting to face a judge she'd never met. Instead, the moment she looked toward the bench, her face turned completely pale, because the person sitting there was someone she thought she had already destroyed. She walked into the courtroom with a confident smile, but the moment she looked at the judge's chair, her entire face went pale. Weeks passed as the investigation continued. The police gathered evidence, questioned witnesses, and slowly built the case. The gasoline purchase, the SUV near my house, and the neighbor's testimony were all starting to paint a very clear picture. Finally, the day of the court hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Several neighbors had come to watch, curious to see what would happen to the woman who had ruled the neighborhood for years. She walked in with her lawyer, dressed confidently, still acting like she was untouchable. To her, this was probably just another problem she believed she could talk her way out of. She took her seat and glanced around the room, barely paying attention to the empty judge's bench. Then the courtroom doors opened. Everyone stood up as the judge walked in, and that's when everything changed. The moment she looked up at the bench, the color drained from her face. Her confident expression disappeared instantly, replaced by pure shock. Because the judge sitting in front of her wasn't a stranger. It was someone she recognized immediately. Someone she had spent weeks trying to intimidate and destroy. Me. The entire courtroom fell into a stunned silence as she realized the situation she was in. The same person whose house had burned down, the same person she had tried to bully into submission, was now the one presiding over the courtroom. Her lawyer quickly leaned over, whispering urgently, clearly realizing the disaster unfolding in front of them. For the first time since the fire, the power had completely shifted. The woman who once controlled the entire neighborhood now looked terrified, sitting quietly in the defendant's chair. And as the hearing began, it became clear that the evidence against her was stronger than anyone expected. But the final moment of justice, the moment that would end this entire nightmare, was still about to come. She thought burning my house would silence me. But when the final evidence was revealed in court, the entire room realized her plan had completely backfired. As the hearing continued, the prosecution began presenting every piece of evidence collected during the investigation. The security footage from the hardware store appeared on the courtroom screen, clearly showing her buying the gasoline container just hours before the fire. Then the witness stepped forward, the same neighbor, who had quietly warned me weeks earlier. He told the court exactly what he saw that night. Her SUV parked near my driveway, shortly before flames began rising from the house. The courtroom grew silent as the timeline became impossible to ignore. Her lawyer tried to argue that the gasoline was meant for yard work and that the witness could have been mistaken. But the evidence kept piling up. Investigators revealed something even more damaging: fingerprints. The gasoline container found near the scene had her fingerprints on it. That single detail destroyed the last defense her lawyer tried to build. For the first time, the woman who had terrorized the neighborhood looked completely defeated. The judge carefully reviewed the evidence while the courtroom waited in tense silence. When the final decision was announced, the result was exactly what many people had hoped for. She was found guilty of arson and criminal property destruction. The woman who once threatened neighbors and tried to control the entire community was now facing serious prison time. As officers escorted her out of the courtroom, several neighbors watched in stunned silence. For years, they had been too afraid to challenge her authority. Now the truth had finally caught up with her. My house was gone and rebuilding it would take time. But one thing had changed forever. The person who tried to destroy my life had ultimately destroyed her own instead. And in the end, the same neighborhood, that once feared her would always remember the moment when justice finally caught up, and the HOA president, who thought she was untouchable, walked out of court in handcuffs.